Welcome to Wild Side, your wild true crime podcast.
We're your hosts, who are sisters, storytellers, and truth seekers.
I'm Bailey, a therapist who is fascinated by all weird and dark human behaviors.
And I'm Chelsea, an educator here to unearth the facts behind the cases.
We cover true crime because some cases are just too dark to forget,
and others are too wild to ignore.
We're so glad you're here, so buckle up
and enjoy the ride.
Hey, Wildsiders, we are here, but hanging on by a thread.
Everything's fine. Everything's fine. It's like that sweet little dog with the fire around it, sitting there drinking coffee. And it's like, it's fine. Everything's fine. But it's Wednesday, and we're halfway through the week. It's hump day, and that's a good thing.
That is a good thing. Chelsea and I just have to, we talked on the phone earlier, and we just laugh at ourselves because we complicate our lives intentionally. We have good intentions, but, you know, she's working on all these certifications and finishing up her master's. I decided I'm going to start a consulting company. Because I don't have enough to do, right?
Yeah. You know, I asked Bailey over the weekend, you know, we were doing this thing, and it was like, what's one word that describes me? And, you know, and she gave her word, and Lucas gave his word, and my kids, you know, and I asked our dad, and I was like, you know, what's one word that you would use to describe me? And he and our mom both were just like, overachiever, right? And so Bailey and I got to talking about this, and I think we both are kind of in that, I don't know, we're in that category of just, we bite off a lot. We chew a lot at one time. So I don't know, overachiever, just ready for action, whatever you want to call it, up for a challenge.
Yeah, I think our nervous system
We're
is
all
used
those
to
things.
it. Our nervous system is used to it. And hence you guys are probably like, when are y'all going to have another interview? That's a great question. Because I was just like, somewhere 2 years ago, I was like, you know what would be a really great idea is to spend 6 hours a week tracking down, recording, and editing an interview every 2 weeks, along with a toddler, a full-time job, and all this other stuff. And I'm sorry, you guys, we don't have the bandwidth right now. So interviews are just come and expect them as presents when they arrive.
Sure. Yeah. Yep. Period. Parrot. So,
well, since we're in this theme of, you know, biting off more than we can chew, hanging on by a thread, overcommitting, and all that stuff, this is going to be a shorter episode because remember we talked about trying out doing a little bit of a shorter episode, like 35-40 minutes. And so bear with us because we shortened the what, Chelsea?
the case. We shortened the script.
Literally, like the document. And so this is a rough estimate. It may be 20 minutes. It may still be an hour. Who knows? But just please send us lots of love regardless.
Yeah. Well, again, I think a lot of people are in a time of busyness. I really do. I think that's just the American society. I think that's the global society. And I think that you guys will appreciate having a shorter episode because more than likely you'll be able to get through it while you're driving to and fro Target. So,
for sure.
Without further ado, let's hop into the babies in the mansion, shall we?
Yep.
So I feel like Bailey and I present stories where the crime is obvious, right? Like you have stalking cases and you have, or just horrendous murder cases, and the crime is extremely obvious, right? It will start with a break-in or a weapon that's recovered or a moment, right? Where everyone can point and say that is where it went wrong, and you've heard us talk about this. Bailey and I like to say there are so many parts in this story when you could have turned that car around, right? And then there are stories like this one where nothing looks wrong at first, right? And those are almost the I don't know, those stories are almost the ones that are scary to me. They terrify me more, because it's hard to put your finger on it. Because everything is structured, it's documented, it's signed, right? You have the contracts, the clinics, the lawyers, people agreeing on paper, right? And in this case, people agreeing on paper to bring a child into the world. And if you look at it, it looks legitimate, right? It looks like a system that is working exactly the way it's supposed to. But every once in a while, as I think you guys have found out with a lot of our cases, um, a system doesn't actually break. There's not like chink in that armor. It gets used, right? And systems do get used and exploited. And they do it quietly. They do it effectively and efficiently and for a long time without anyone asking the right questions. And that is what we have tonight, because no one thinks to question something that looks this organized and this structured until one detail doesn't fit. And then it's like, oh, wait, there's another that doesn't fit. And then all of a sudden, you're not looking at a family or a pattern anymore. Like you are looking at terror and chaos and corruption.
Yeah, so this is a little bit different of arguably, I wouldn't even call it a white collar crime, but a non-murder crime, but it's still really crazy, right? And this is where it starts to get uncomfortable because this case today isn't about someone being forced into something necessarily. It has a component of that, but not as obvious as normal cases in true crime are. So like no one was like drugged and locked in a dingy dark room. You know, it's definitely more nefarious than that. And we will start to see how this case, as we go through it, initially there doesn't seem to be a lot of like red flags, maybe just kind of like, huh, that's weird. But then it starts to become more and more and more, and people start becoming removed, the communication stops, and they start to walk away. And that's what it starts to become. And so it's through a series of small decisions that kind of create this case until eventually, you look up and realize you're standing inside something you have never agreed to. And if you had seen the full picture from the start, you never would have.
Something that we've talked a lot about, I know in my inner circle, is um, the inability to have children. And I don't know, Bailey, if you have experienced this in your inner circles, but I've known a lot of couples that struggle with infertility. And that is that's just a really sensitive subject. That seems to be something that so many families desire, is to have a kid. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, and what's cool about the day and age in which we live is we do have options, right? We have things like surrogacy, for example. And, at its core, speaking specifically at surrogacy is framed as something that provides hope, right? It's an option for family. And it is a solution. It is one person helping another build a family that they couldn't have done on their own, right? Yes, there's a financial component, but it's often wrapped in something that really is more meaningful. To me, it is the most generous thing that a person can do. Like, it is full of connection, it has purpose. And for a lot of women, it's not just about the money, it's about doing something significant for someone else, right? I mean, I've talked about this where I was like, man, I would love to be in that position, to help a family member or a friend if I could. I've gotten too old at this point, but I've just always thought that was such a beautiful thing. And there are agencies and there are contracts, there are medical teams, there are legal protections that are involved in this whole process of surrogacy, or uh, essentially at its core, providing a family the opportunity to extend their family, right? To bring a child into their family. Everything is structured in a way that makes it feel very safe and regulated and really, I don't know. I wanted to say deceivingly compassionate, but I think for most cases it is truly compassionate. And I think that's exactly what drew the lady in our case, Kayla Elliott, in, right? She wasn't walking into something that was reckless. Like, she wasn't ignoring the obvious warning signs, because there weren't obvious warning signs. She was stepping into something that looked, again, organized, legitimate, honest, kind, admirable, all of those things, right? And the idea that you could help someone have a child while also being compensated for the time and the risk and the physical toll that is pregnancy, right? That balance is what makes surrogacy so appealing. And it feels like a win-win situation. And when you've entered through an agency with contracts in place and professionals guiding you, it doesn't feel like you're stepping into uncertainty. It feels like you're stepping into something established, or so it would seem.
And so it did seem for Kayla Elliott, right? Nothing about her surrogacy journey initially felt wrong to her. In fact, it felt right. It was structured, there was predictable, like something, the process had been done before. But it also, as time grew on, things started happening that Kayla couldn't really dismiss, starting with updates, right? She expected updates from and communication from the family in which she was carrying a child for, conversations, connections, but the communication was not constant, right? It was always through a coordinator, and every message, every update, every question always went through someone else. Now, I understand that some people want to keep kind of a mediator in a situation like this because of, personal preference for whatever reason. But in this case, Kayla would reflect that the parents were always just too busy, right? And at first, it makes sense. People have lives, careers, responsibilities, doesn't feel like a red flag until it keeps happening over and over and over again. And I think where the biggest red flag came in was when Kayla Elliott finally delivered the child. The mother, the adoptive mother, came into the hospital room, barely making eye contact with the child, handed her $2,000, and then left. Almost like it was purely transactional, something that, this woman who just carried a child for 9 months, she was a little kind of put off by that. But it was subtle, but not quite subtle enough to fully ignore.
And for a while, nothing happens. Not in a dramatic way, at least. The process continues the way it's supposed to, right? Appointments, updates through the coordinator, the steady rhythm of something that feels structured, even if it's a little impersonal. From the outside, there's nothing you could point to and say, this is wrong. I feel it in my gut. This gives me a bad feeling. It was just, I don't know. It's just quiet, right? It's distant. It's a little more transactional than expected, but still, again, within the realm of normal. So the first crack that Kayla experiences, it's not necessarily something that you want to, call the press over. It's just really weird, right? Like, it's one of those things where she's like, "Oh, this started out as feeling a little off in the hospital, a little bit impersonal, but now this just feels really, really odd." So, where was that first crack? So one day, Kayla is online moving through the same kind of space a lot of surrogates move through, right? And these are groups and forums and places where women share experiences and ask questions and compare notes, right? Which is very normal in our day and age. And she sees a post. It is another surrogate talking about her experience. Again, nothing super unusual about that. But then something catches her attention, and the details just felt really familiar, right? Kind of a deja vu almost situation. And the agency sounds the same, the process sounds the same. And then she sees it, the intended parents, right? And what she sees are the same parents. And for a second, she just kind of sits there, right? Like, that's kind of weird, but I mean, okay, not impossible. There are situations where families they use more than one surrogates. It happens. It's not super common, but not completely uncommon. So your brain does what the brain does, and that it just kind of explains it away, right? And you think, okay, maybe they're trying for siblings really close in age. Maybe this is just how they're building their family. I mean, sure, it's unusual, but not alarming. Um, but then, of course, you always get those plot twists.
Now, as the conversation in this forum continues, more of the details start coming out, more context. And that's when a number starts to come up and everything kind of starts to shift because it's not like a big, headline on the local news. It's not framed as this big, crazy thing that's happened, but it starts to happen between conversations on these posts, right? People, word of mouth, overlapping, sharing details, sharing information. And what starts to happen is there's more and more and more Kayla Elliott's out there, more surrogates for the same family. Another one, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. Not one baby, not two babies, 13 babies, all within the same time frame that this couple had paid for surrogacy for 13 babies. And I think our brain kind of doesn't know what to do with that initially. Like, wait a second, 13 babies. I don't understand, right? Because it doesn't fit into a framework that we're used to fitting things into. So instead of reacting right away, there's just kind of like this, huh? What? But 13 babies is definitely more than just a big family. It's obviously a lot different than, having children, even in close age consecutively over 13 years. We're talking about within weeks and months of each other, right? So people start picking up on this and it starts to create a little bit of confusion at first, maybe some curiosity, maybe a little bit of denial. But then as more and more babies come out, this is when the story starts to feel like there is something seriously wrong with this couple and what they're doing.
Once a number is out there, you can't unsee it, right? Once you realize something like this, you can't unsee it. Like, I remember years and years and years ago hearing about a kind of a family, a friend of a friend of a friend type of situation, and they had like 12 or 13 kids, right? And you just think that is, for this day and age, I know I've said this a bunch, but for this day and age, that's a that's a lot of kids. Like, what are the dynamics, right? What is going on? And especially if you add the surrogacy piece to that, right? And it just changes the way that you look at something, right? And especially for Kayla, she's starting to think like, not only is this strange, but am I a pawn, right? Like, am I a piece to this bigger game that I don't know about? So Kayla, she could not leave this thing alone, right? Like, it was an itch that she then had to scratch because it just did not seem plausible for this many people to be having identical experiences. And really the number 13 was just kind of sticking with her, meaning like that just seems like an extraordinary amount of pregnancies that were all being funneled, if you will, to the same parents. So once you start pulling on a thread like that, and once you start or once you stop looking at this as not just something strange, but something that is connected and working to form this bigger picture, the numbers just, they just don't lie, right? And the more she pulled on this thread, the bigger these numbers got, the more she unraveled truths about this situation. And the number was not 13 like she originally thought. It wasn't even close. That was the tip of the iceberg.
By the time authorities got involved, investigators in Arcadia, California were looking at a couple. And again, you guys, I apologize for the pronunciations. It's Silvia Zhang, who is 38 years old, and Guojun Xuan, 65, connected to more than 20 children. Okay? Again, and I'm not bashing on like quote unquote normal family sizes. I'm like, that's more than normal. I don't mean that having a ton of kids necessarily isn't normal, but paying 20 different surrogates for 20 children within the same time span maybe falls outside of the L-shaped curve, right? And so how did the attention turn to this couple? Well, what started down the path, right? Kayla kind of started raising some alarms, but what really kind of tipped the scale for investigators was when a 2-month-old infant was brought in with a traumatic head injury. And according to investigators, the injury was linked to a nanny who had violently shaken the baby. But that part really starts to shift everything because the child wasn't taken to the hospital for 2 full days after the injury. And so that's a big concern, right? Obviously, the nanny shaking the child is a big concern, but not taking a child to the hospital for 2 days after an injury like that, it's obvious that there's something going on. This is no longer just like a bad nanny, but there is harm involved, and it forces attention to the couple in a way that, Facebook posts and comments in groups didn't before.
So after the incident with the 2-month-old that was brought in for the shaken baby syndrome or the traumatic brain injury, the authorities step in and everything starts moving quickly. And within a couple of days, 15 children were removed from the couple's home there in Arcadia. They were immediately taken into custody of the Los Angeles County Child Welfare Services. They were not scattered across different households, not spread out over time. They were removed all at once from a single residence. And that's quite an extraction. I know that sounds like such a sterile word, but I mean, that's really what it is. It's taking 15 individual children out all at once. And then as investigators continued digging, they located 6 more children connected to the same couple, but they were not residing in that house. They were living somewhere else. And that brought the grand total up to 21 children in the couple's, we're going to say, care, right? I'm
That's
gonna use that
better. I
term
was gonna
loosely.
say possession, but
I
care is
know. I literally was gonna say possession, but then stopped myself because I'm like, but it does. It makes it feel like it's a possession case, right? Like these children were treated as things. So most of them were not even school aged, right? Authorities reported that the children ranged from 2 months old to 13 years old, right? But the majority of them were in that infant to pre-K range, which means this wasn't something that developed slowly over decades. Like this was a rapid, man, I hate using these words, like, I don't know, consumption, attainment, right? Bringing these children in rapidly. Multiple pregnancies happening across overlapping timelines, right? Like Bailey said, within a few months or weeks of each other. And then, according to investigators, many of those children were born through surrogacy arrangements, with women across the country now coming forward saying that they had carried children for this same couple, often without knowing how many others were involved. So now you don't just have a number, you have a system, right, that was actively producing that number. And it was, again, a lot of deception was being used. These women thought that they were signing up to do a really, really generous and noble thing. And they were actually just, oh man, I don't know, producing more children for this couple. And as quickly as these children were identified, they were placed into protective custody and foster care. State systems stepped in to figure out what should happen next because, I mean, there's no clear, stable structure already in place for them, right? And that's when the story stops being strange, if you will, and starts being something else entirely. Because now you're not just asking how this happened, you're asking how was it allowed to continue for so long? And what do we do next?
Yeah, and one of the things that I wanna kind of throw in here at this point in time is anybody who has been around children, even if you don't have your own children, if you've been to a house where there is a child present, you would notice that there's usually stuff everywhere, toys, spilled drinks, what have you. Now, you would imagine that if there's 15 children in a house, right? That when you would walk into a house, it would be absolute chaos with 15 kids, right? But this is the weirdest part about this whole case is that when investigators initially got to the couple's house, this huge mansion in California, when they first got there, at first glance, nothing looked wrong. Nothing. The house was very clean. It was very organized. It was very put together. And to take it a step further, the kids appeared to be fed, right? They were not malnourished. There were adults present, so nannies moving through the space, managing routines, keeping things running. So there were multiple nannies being hired to manage these 15 children. And so you're just like, okay, what is going on here? You got 15 kids in this house. Everything looks under control. But remember, you guys, per the usual true crime podcast, if things look almost too organized and put together and under control, that doesn't always mean that it's safe, right? And the longer that investigators kind of sat with that initial introduction into the house, it started to really shift quickly for them because what they eventually started to describe in that house was this wasn't just a well-run household. It was something more, I don't know if I have a good word for it, uniform, authoritarian maybe. They looked very similar. They had similar routines And in some cases, they were literally arranged in rows and they were structured in a way that obviously does not feel like a big, happy family, but almost like a little army, right? And I'm not trying to be funny, but quite literally, I want you to picture that in your head because that is really what it looked like to investigators, right? And I think part of the problem here, and maybe why it slipped through the cracks for so long, is because to somebody looking on the outside in, we're kind of taught to look for dysfunction. And if dysfunction isn't super apparent, then we kind of assume that there's no dysfunction there, right? And unfortunately, that's just how the systems work. And so it really makes you wonder why? Why were there so many babies? Why did this couple adopt so many babies? What was happening to these babies? What were they doing with these babies? What was the intention with these babies? And, famous Chelsea and Bailey perspective is how come the system didn't catch it?
And I think that's where you have to zoom out, right? Because if you stay focused on just the house or the couple themselves, or even the children, I feel like you're missing the bigger picture. And this didn't happen in isolation. It didn't require someone breaking into a system or finding some rare loophole that no one else could access. This actually happened because the system itself is fragmented, it's inconsistent, and in a lot of ways, largely unregulated at the federal level, which is a really scary thing, right? So, in the United States, surrogacy laws vary widely from state to state. Not that anybody cares about my opinion. I like that states can run their state the way they see fit. I think that's a great thing. With that being said, I think there are certain aspects that need to be better regulated by a bigger system, by our federal government, right? And so you have some states that have clear protections and processes with surrogacy, right? Others have almost none. And there is no centralized federal oversight tracking how many surrogacies are being coordinated, by whom, or across how many jurisdictions, right? And in many cases, agencies can operate with very few barriers to entry, which again that's just shocking to me. In this case, business records showed a company called Mark Surrogacy Investment LLC registered at the same address as the Arcadia home, an agency tied directly to the people at the center of all of this. Now, if that is not screaming fraud, I don't know what else I don't know what to tell you. If you're not picking up on that, I don't know what to say. That registration was later terminated, but for a period of time, it existed as a functioning part of the surrogacy system, right? And that matters because it shifts this from a personal situation to an operational one, right? Because on paper, remember we had talked about that at the beginning of this episode, like so much of this looked, all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed, right? On paper, everything can still look legitimate. If you have paperwork, if you have an LLC behind your name, you are an official bona fide corporation or business, right? According to investigators, Silvia Zhang was able to produce birth certificates, some from outside California, that listed her as the mother of these children. Documentation that at face value validated what was happening. And when paperwork exists, right, when systems generate official records, it creates a sense of legitimacy that is hard to challenge in real time, right? You have legs to stand on when you have paperwork. Even law enforcement acknowledged how complex this whole situation was. One investigator openly stated they weren't familiar with how surrogacy laws function across jurisdiction, and that a deeper investigation was needed to even understand what they were looking at. So again, a lot, it's, I don't know if it's necessarily ignorance, but I think there is a touch of that. Like, I think it's more not necessarily ignorance, but because so many of these laws are so complex and because they vary from state to state, that it really does take a deeper and more intricate investigation, right? So the FBI now has to get involved in the situation. Um, but that came after the situation really had already escalated to this point of, removal of the children, and what should we do, right? And then you lay in the human side of it, right? Which is women across the country coming forward saying that they had been surrogates for this couple, many of them believing they were helping build a small family, a one child, maybe two, not knowing that there were others, not knowing that there were multiple others. And I think that is the part that really makes people feel, I know it for me, it made me feel the most uncomfortable because here's at the end of the day, right? Like, you need a license to cut hair. You need a license to perform services that carry far less long-term impact. But you don't need a unified enforceable system to oversee the coordination of human life between strangers across state lines and for money, right? There's no license for
Which is
that,
wild to me.
which is literally wild. You have to have a license to fish in a pond.
Yes.
You can literally be fined for poaching an
Yes.
animal,
Yep. Yep.
but you don't need a license for this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, make that one make sense. And again, like when a system has that kind of fragmentation, when oversight is inconsistent, when information isn't shared, when legitimacy can be built through paperwork alone, it just leaves so many rooms for mistakes. Like, this stuff is the product of these systems, right? It it just leaves room for scale. It leaves room for repetition. And eventually it leaves room for something like this to exist way longer than it should have. Like, Bailey, this is insane. I'm sorry. This is wild to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why we're talking about it right now. And so this is the thing, you guys. This is still an ongoing case, right? And if this already feels a little overwhelming, just wait, it gets worse. Because this isn't something that just happened. It's still unfolding. There are women right now in real time still pregnant, still carrying babies connected to this situation, finding out mid-process that what they thought they had agreed to was not at all the full picture, right? One of those women who was a surrogate was told she was helping a couple complete their family. Like, oh, of course, like, people want to help. That there was one child already, maybe one more on the way, but it was contained. It was this cute little family, and I want to give them what they are looking for. And for months, everything again felt normal. There was contracts, medical procedures, blah 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 blah, and then all communication stopped. Nothing. She was totally ghosted. Her lawyers couldn't get responses, and then the news broke. Like, she learns about this, for lack of better words, this baby mill, and she's mid-pregnancy, right? And now she's kind of in the middle of an active investigation, right? Like, now there's pressure to scramble and figure out, like, what do we do with this baby? You know, what do we do with this? Because what we have lined up obviously isn't going to happen, because legally she doesn't automatically have parental rights to the child. The contract actually says otherwise. And so now you've got this emotional weight of this reality to deal with. And so, she's just kind of stuck with this overwhelming sense of, loss and desperation, and not to know what to do. Another surrogate ends up giving birth to a baby boy. And instead of handing him off, she holds him. She names him Gabriel, and she forms an attachment, right? And right now, this woman is now fighting with the system, with the state. She's fighting legally and financially to keep him, because it is not all, the son is not automatically hers. And so uh, this is just, it's crazy, because on top of that, now this isn't from like the most, I guess, legitimate source. It's from ABC 7 Eyewitness News. But the father or I should say the adoptive father, Guojun, Xuan, he has now allegedly been tied to properties linked to gambling and drugs. So as of right now, you guys, we do not know why. We do not know where these kids, why they adopted them or had surrogates across different states. We don't know the answers, because everybody is still kind of knee deep in trying to figure out what the heck is going on.
I mean, I hate to say it, but the first thing that jumps to my mind is trafficking. And I hate that. That is like, surely not. Surely not. But I mean, if okay, so again, I had learned of a family a billion years ago, and whether it's true or not, I don't know, but the word on the street was they had kids because that meant that they got a really nice tax return, right, for each kid. And so it was a way for them to essentially, I
Earn
don't know, have
income.
income, earn
Yeah.
income. Now, I don't know how this system works, but I have heard this before. I've heard it a couple of different times in different instances. But my question is, they are paying these surrogates. They are paying people to have these children for them, so that there's no way that that cost could be offset by any sort of tax return. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So unfortunately, the only thing left in my mind is, again, trafficking.
Yeah. And I think we shouldn't have to do this disclaimer. We are not making allegations, because it is an ongoing investigation. And I think, Chelsea, your thoughts are valid, because if I were to think like like a criminal, okay? If I paid $20,000 for a child, let's make the math easy. Let's say I paid $10,000 for a child and we had 21 children. How much is that? $21,000. No.
$210,000.
I'm not a smart man, but I know I love this. What else? 20 grand, 200. Oh my gosh, $200,000. The only way I would have 21 children and like 15 of them in my house and hire like 6 nannies is if I am selling these children for double, triple, or quadruple what I paid. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
I,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know, man.
I don't know. I don't know. And I
It's a
just don't,
lot.
And back to the surrogate mother who's now fighting for this baby. I'm sorry, but that's what I would do. I really think that there's no way, knowing that there's an ongoing investigation, knowing this situation, I think I would hire somebody to find any and every loophole that could
Yeah.
possibly be found. Because at what point is that not supervised neglect, right? Like you're knowingly
Well, sure.
turning a kid over, right? Releasing a child into a dangerous situation. I don't
Are
know. There's got to
are
be
you
laws against
saying
this.
neglect from the surrogates?
Yeah. Yes.
But they didn't know. They didn't
But they
know.
do. But they do now. That's what I'm saying. Like the lady who right now is trying to fight to keep custody. Right? In my mind, I'm just saying I agree with that 100% because I don't think I could release a child into that situation because I would feel like that was against my ethics. Like, it would feel like supervised neglect to me,
Yeah, well,
right?
I don't so, yes, okay, now I see what you're saying. I think that they can't because of the ongoing investigation, right? Like, that's part of the problem is now nobody kind of really knows what to do because
Mhm.
obviously these children with, 21 open CPS cases, nobody is going to allow them custody. No judge is going to allow custody right now, especially with this stuff.
But what okay, and that is a valid point, and I think the more I think about this, the more I'm saying, I don't know if I'd be able to release a kid knowing that it's going straight into, like, a foster system, right? Like, that would be hard for me.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
I did not sign up to have a kid turned over to a
Yeah.
state system or a foster system. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like, I signed up for this child to be in a, 1 to 2 child home. It was like, I did not sign up. And the
Yeah.
fine print did not say any of this. So to
And
me, I feel like that is a violation of contract.
well, yes, for sure. And that's what these women are fighting, and I think that this is, one of the reasons why we're covering this case is because I don't think there has been a case quite like this
Right.
in modern day. And so
Sure.
now it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the legal system, with surrogacy contracts, with autonomy, because the surrogate, not the surrogate, sorry, the adoptive parents that are now obviously under investigation for all of this, it was their surrogacy company.
And that's wild.
So,
Like,
yeah.
you wanna talk about a bowl of noodles. Like, this thing is twistier and messier than a bowl of noodles.
Yeah.
This is wild.
Well, if you guys want to read into this a little bit more, because we didn't include a ton. I mean, we include a lot of the details, but not everything. Ava Kaufman did a fabulous deep dive on this in the New Yorker. And the title of the article is "The Babies Kept in a Mysterious Los Angeles Mansion." And it's a really great piece. So you guys feel free to look into that and keep your eyes and ears open over the next months to year with this case to see like what shakes out from it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and this is one of those things that I would love to hear if other people have heard of anything like this, have experienced something like this, just to have more information, right? Like, have you had a good experience with a surrogacy agency? Is this something that people should be more aware of? Or I don't know. I would love to hear if you guys have stories.
Yeah. Well, as always, you guys, thanks for hanging out with us through this wild and crazy surrogacy of a ride.
And as always, we will catch you on the wild side.
Bye, guys.
Later, Gators.